number of bonuses paid late last year to avoid high taxes this year. Consumers spent that extra money in the first quarter, but that boost will disappear over the year, no doubt about that, and throw in tax returns. Meanwhile, defense spending has been a drag on the growth for the past 2 years. A decade after the World Trade attack, America officially ended the war in Iraq and assassinated the Al-Qaeda leader bin Laden. The shift in foreign policy is still trickling through the real economy. Compensation for military and civilian employees working in defense has fallen every quarter since 2012. Be Q1 there. Major contractors like Lockheed Martin have laid off, brought out hundreds of employees, including top executives, etc. Consolidated. Well, that was a temporary make-work economy to begin with. We go back to aerospace, and we need to look at. I remember when I worked with jobs with peace as an economist, and that was a situation that was coming, transformation from a war climate, a war economy, and we were talking about a peace dividend. That was during the Clinton years. Then we had a dot-com boom, and before the bust, but nonetheless, things were perking up. The nation was on the move. Defense procurements, going back here, reached its high in 2008 at $400 billion for the year. It's fallen steadily since. Last year's contract awards dropped 15% below the peak. Well, they should have dropped 15% below the peak. This was the expense of the nation, and most people don't talk about this, but the problem is these huge deficits run up were responsible for defense spending and economic policy of the fellow that they dedicated his library in Dallas, Texas, one G.W. Bush. This also means the Pentagon's $500 billion budget cut required by sequester could hold back GNP for years to come. Well, the problem is this is an artificially based economy. Eventually would hold it back anyway. Fairfax Base, Main Tech International is a prime example of efforts of wartime spending reduction. The contract depend heavily on battlefield work, has seen significant financial declines. In 2012, profits of $95 million was down 30% from and counting down from 2011, but they're still doing quite well. Now the company is also facing cuts from sequester. In earnings call in February, deadline for implementation loomed. Top executives highlighted the uncertainty of its impact on the bottom line. Never fear, they're rallying the savers now towards Syria. No one has a crystal ball on what's going to happen with sequester. Chief Financial Officer Kevin Phillips. We are taking a conservative view based on the uncertainty. It doesn't cover the worst case scenario. There is no ability to tell right now. Well, a lot of that depends on quote-unquote foreign policy, but the foreign policy, all of it, doesn't matter what they do. They can spend money in Syria if they like or wherever. The problem is it only adds to the deficit. And this whole austerity thing called sequestration, for what quote-unquote savings it will get if you bust the budget open, you really don't save anything. In fact, you lose money because you literally end up with a situation whereby your debt rises and the cost of your debt service rises, and you're in worse shape before because you've destroyed your economy in the process. So this is in terms of economy where they stand. It's one of those situations that is a very unfortunate situation, and it is not a very realistic situation. Moving on here. Back to the New York Times. And George Jones. George Jones, the defendant, this is from the obituary in the Times, from John Arpels. Let me start again here. George Jones, The definitive country singer, last half of the century, whose songs about heartbreak, hard drinking echoed his own turbulent life, died on Friday. He was 81 years old. His publicist, Webster and Associates, said he died in hospital after being admitted there on April 18th with a fever and irregular blood pressure. Mr. Jones' singing was universally respected and just as highly imitated. With a baritone, let me just readjust something here. With a baritone bass, but with elastic as a steel guitar string. He found vulnerability and double behind the cheerful drive of honky tonk and brought suspense to every cymbal, merging bluesy sides with the tight, quivering ornaments of Appalachian singing. In his most memorable song, All the Pleasures of Down Home Saturday Night Couldn't Free Him from Private Pain, his up-tempo songs have undergone undercurrent solitude, and the ballads have become his specialty, were suffused with sodic dissolution, and when you are on stage or recording, you put yourself in those stories, he said. Stoic, interesting. Nonetheless, fans heard in those songs the strains of life in which success and excess battled for decades. The Jones nickname the Possum for his close-set eyes and pointy nose, later No-Show Jones for the concerts he missed during drinking and drugging binges. Bought, sold, and traded dozens of houses, hundreds of cars. He earned millions of dollars. Lost much of it to drug use, mismanagement, divorce settlements. Although through it all, he kept touring and recording songs, mournful songs that continue to ring true today. Mr. Jones is a presence on the country charts from the 50s into the 21st century, and as early as 1960, he was praised by listeners and fellow musicians as the greatest living country singer. He was never a crossover act when country fans revered him. Pop and rock stations ignored him. By 1980, Jones had come to stand for a country tradition. Country singers throughout the decade, from Garth Brooks to Randy Travis to Toby Keith, Tim McGraw, learned licks from Jones, who never bothered to wear a cowboy hat. Nobody needs to sound like George Jones, the George Jones record. That's from Alan Jackson, the country star and songwriter, once told in an interview, but that's what I've always done, and I'm going to keep it that way. I try to. George Glenn Jones was born in with a broken arm in Chicago, Texas, an oil field town, on the 12th of September 1931 to Clara and George Washington Jones. His father, a truck driver, pipe fitter, bought George his first guitar when he was 9. And with the help of the Sunday school teacher, he taught himself to play melodies and chords. As a teenager, he sung on the streets in a Pentecostal revival service in honky tonks in the Gulf Coast port of Beaumont. Bus drivers let him ride free if he sung, so he was appearing on radio shows, forging a style molded on Lefty Frizzell, Roy Acuff, and Hank Williams. First single. Jones married Dorothy Bonnaroo when he was 17, but divorced her before the birth of his daughter. He served in the Marines from 50 to 53, then signed to Starday Records, whose co-owner Pop Daly became Jones's producer and manager. Jones' first single, No Money in This Deal, was released in 1954. the year he married his second wife, Shirley Corley. They had 2 sons before divorce in 1968. White Baby was released in 1965. Jones became Jones's first hit. During the 1950s, he wrote or collaborated on many of his songs, including hits like Just One More, What I Am Worth, Color of the Blues. Though he later gave up songwriting in the mid-50s, he had a brief fling with rockabilly, recording as Thumper Jones and as Hank Smith. A lot of these artists, incidentally, Hank Williams did that. He was Luke the Drifter, various types. But under his own name, he was a country hit. He began singing at the Grand Ole Opry in 1956. He already became a drinker. White Lightning, the #1 hit in 1959, required 83 takes because Jones was drinking through the session on the road playing one-night stands. He tore up hotel rooms and got into brawls. He also began missing shows because he was too drunk to perform. But on stage and on recording, his career was advancing. In 1962, he recorded one of his signature songs, She Thinks I Still Care, which was nominated for a Grammy, another one of his most lasting hits, The Race Is Won, appeared in 1964. He was part of the first country concert at Madison Square Garden, a 4-day show, 10 acts in 1964, that included Ernest Tubb, Bill Monroe, Buck Owen. Each act was allotted 2 songs per show, but on the opening night, Jones played 5 before he was carried off the stage. In 1966, Jones tried to start a country theme park in Valder, East Texas suburb where he lived, called George Jones Ribbon Ranch. It was the first of many shaky business ventures. Jones gave only 1 performance after singing. He disappeared for a month, rambling across Texas. His drinking had gotten worse, and at one point his wife hid the keys for all his cars. So he drove a lawnmower to Beaumont to a liquor store, an incident he later commemorated in a song and in a music video. They were divorced not long after. Jones had his next #1 country single in 1968 with Walk Through This World With Me. He moved to Nashville, opened a nightclub there, Possum Holler, which lasted a few months. I guess he was probably his best customer. He met a rising country star named Tammy Wynette in 1966. They fell in love while on tour. She was married at the time to Don Chappelle, a songwriter whose material had appeared on both of their albums. One night in 1968, Jones recalls Wynette and Mr. Chappelle were arguing in their dining room when Jones arrived. He upended the dining room table and told Wynette he loved her. She took her 3 kids and left with Jones. They were married in '69, settled in Lakeland, Florida. They're on land around his plantation-style mansion. Jones built another theme park called Old Plantation Music Park. Jones severed his connection with Mr. Daly and later maintained that he had not received proper royalties. In 1971, he signed a contract at Epic Records, which was also Tammy Wynette's label, and the couple began recording duets produced by Billy Sherrill, whose elaborate arrangements helped reshape the sound of Nashville. And 3 of those duets we're going to hold on. Golden Ring, Near You were #1 country hits, an accomplishment made only prodigious by the songwriters, widely reported marital frictions. Mr. and Mrs. Country Music was painted on their tour bus. The marriage was falling apart, only to withstand the bitter quarrels. Mr. Jones's drinking and amphetamine use. After one fight, he was put into a straitjacket and hospitalized for 10 days. The Lakeland Music Park was shut down. The couple divorced in '75, and next year Jones released 2 albums. entitled "The Battle